It was the sophomore year of my undergraduate work at Truman State University, and I took my first acting class. Anybody taken an acting class? Intro to theater? Okay, so I've got to explain this a little bit. Okay, so an acting class is full of different things. You learn movement, so you learn like what your body's doing while you're acting, so you're not just like, your face is doing all sorts of things and your body's all hunched over even though you're smiling. You learn how to work with your face so that, when you're saying something exciting, you're actually smiling and your eyebrows are actually up and you're not just like down and you're talking monotone like that. You get to learn how to write a little bit. You get to learn how to do Shakespeare, which was my least favorite part. Who is Shakespeare? Yeah, you should look into him. But there was an exercise. There's an exercise that my acting professor had us do that reminded me of our text for today. My acting professor asked us to observe someone, to find somebody on our campus to observe, to watch, to look at, to figure out, and to ultimately tell their story. And as I was walking to class, as we just had this assignment the next day, as I was walking to class, I noticed a guy, a very unique guy. I saw him the next few days afterwards, and he was carrying this briefcase, this brown briefcase. And that was odd for me, because most college students at Truman State University had a backpack, not a briefcase, a leather business briefcase. And the guy just looked maybe 10 years too old. It looked like he was in his mid to late 30s, and he lived in an undergraduate dorm. Just a little out of place. His clothes. He wore nice clothes, but they often didn't match. Maybe, greens and blues and purples. I'm not good at fashion, but clothes that just didn't match. He was also of Asian descent, and I didn't take the time to get to know where he was from, what specific country, but in the middle of Kirksville, northeast Missouri, farm country, if you're a different ethnicity than Anglo-white, you stand out a little bit. That was like when I visited El Salvador in the seminary, and I stood out like a sore thumb as a pale white gringo in the middle of El Salvador. He stuck out. The thing, though, that caught my attention the most was this hat he was wearing. It was this flat, rimmed hat with like this top hat type of thing, but it was rounded on the top. And he wore it every day. It didn't matter what he was wearing. It didn't matter what the weather was, whether it was sunny or not, or rainy or snowy or not. He always would wear that hat. And so I picked him to be the guy that I would observe and ultimately write his story. He was an interesting guy. And I only ever observed him from a distance. It reminds me of our text for today. And I want you to open up your Bibles to page 895 if it's a Pew Bible, because I want us to be in this text for today. John chapter 9, the story of the man born blind. And Jesus, passed by, and he saw a man. I want to stop there for a minute. And Jesus passed by, and he saw a man. How beautiful that is, if you think about it. And also very convicting for me. That Jesus saw a man. You might be asking why. See people all the time. Pass by people on the street all the time. See people in the cars all the time. But seeing people is difficult for us. We see the car, the house, the outfit. We see the tattoos, the gauges, the piercings, the shaved head. We see the different ethnicity, the different clothing, the different cultural background. And we miss the person. We read the disciples' response as they observed this man from a distance. They said this, "Rabbi, who sinned? This man or his parents, that he was born blind?" See, the disciples saw a problem. They saw a mess. They saw an issue. They didn't see a person. It was a common belief back then that if you were born with an ailment, if you were born with blindness or paralysis or any kind of disease, then it was either your parent or your parent who sinned and you were suffering the punishment for it, or somehow you sinned, you did something in the womb which caused you to have that ailment. That was a common belief back then. That was this man's story. One of sin and punishment. That either his parents or he sinned, and the result of his life was punishment for that sin. That was the story that people were writing about this man. You see it also in the Pharisees. You were born in utter sin. You were blind. Later on in the chapter. We, like the disciples, miss the person. And we focus on the problem. We focus on the mess. We focus on what doesn't fit in with our reality of normal. We see the clothing and the car and the house and the young woman around an older man's arm. And we tell a story about a man who's hungry for money, fulfilled by pride, and popularity. We see tattoos and gauges and piercings and a shaved head of a young woman, and we see a mess, a weirdo, an unlovable person. We miss the person. We see the clothing and the culture and the head dressing, and we see a problem. We see a cultural difference that can't be crossed. We get so caught up in the mess, in the problem, that we miss the person. And Jesus passed by, and he saw a man. He didn't see a mess. He didn't see a problem. He saw a person. And he doesn't see your mess. He sees you. He doesn't see your problems. He sees you. Jesus passed by and he saw a man. But that wasn't the end of the story. That wasn't the end of the story because Jesus actually went to the man. While the disciples observed from far away, while they turned him into a theological discussion, a problem, a mess, Jesus went to the mess. Instead of talking theology, Jesus did theology. He got down in the mud as he had done so back at the creation of the world. And he spat in the mud and he spat in the dirt and made mud and rubbed it on the guy's eyes. He got in his mess. He got in the problems. And he brought this man's story of sin and punishment into a grander story, into a better story, into the salvific story of the world. He got down in the mess. He saw the man, and he opened up his eyes. And he gets into the mess of your life. He gets into the problems of your life. And he opens up your eyes to not only see the mess and the problems, but also to see the way out. To see the gift that he is in your life, the work that he's doing through you and in you. You see, we get caught up in the problems and the mess. We see the car and the house and the money and the young lady, and we tell the story of a money-hungry man who only is fulfilled by pride and possessions, and we don't get to know the person who's just trying to search for some fulfillment in life. And is searching for it in the wrong places, who has 2 kids who love him and he loves, and who have successful careers, and a man who loves to fly fish on the weekends. We don't get to know the person and their story because we make one up for them. We see the tattoos and the gauges in their ears and the piercings and the shaved side of the young woman's head, and we see a mess. We see an unlovable wreck of a life. We wonder how anybody could find her attractive. And we don't get to know the person who's been abused as a child and is just searching for a little bit of love, a little bit of identity, a little bit of comfort, and that's how she's found to express herself. That's the community in which she has found love and compassion in a world that hates her. We look at the different ethnicity and the different clothing. And while we may see opportunity, it's too much of a jump for us to make that stretch, to reach out to them, to get to know them, to build a relationship with them. We see a problem for us and for our country. Instead of getting to know the person who's just trying to make a little security for his family, who lives in a studio apartment with 4 kids and a wife and is just making it. And he's just doing what he knows is best. We too often see the mess and the problem, and we forget about the man and the woman and the person. But in that first verse, in that first verse of a very long chapter, we see that Jesus doesn't see the mess or the problem. I think about my own life. I think about my own life, and I wonder what the story is that people are telling about me. As I look at that rich man or that tattooed girl or that guy from a different country, I wonder what people are saying about me. Or maybe I'm too young to be the pastor of a church. Or they don't like my clothes, or they think I'm weird because I talk funny or something. I wonder what kind of stories people are telling about us. And does it matter? Because it doesn't. Because as a child of God, as one who Christ came down to get you out of your mess, you are in that grander story of His. Your life doesn't begin with sin, and it doesn't end in punishment. And neither does the blind man. It begins with Jesus seeing you and coming to you. He turns, what that means for us is that within that grander story, what looks like a mess actually ends up becoming a message. What looks like weakness actually ends up becoming a witness. What looks like a test or a testing looks like a testimony. Because through that mess, Christ works. Through that weakness, Christ works. Through that test, Christ works. As a part of a grander story, your mess doesn't just remain a mess. Your weakness doesn't just remain weakness. The tests and the failure to complete those tests don't just remain tests. They become something. You become something. You become a recreated, beautiful child of God despite your mess, weakness, and failed test. We look out in the world around us, and it's changing so quickly. I can't keep up with it. Even only being here for 8 months, I can't keep up with it. It's hard for me to engage sometimes with people because they're just so different than me. But Jesus is calling us here to take time to see the person, to see the hurts and the pains, and to bring Christ into their life, to speak Christ into their life. Well, honestly, Christ is already there if that conversation is happening. Christ is already there. And we're called to bring it to light. The one thing I got to say here, and we see that through the rest of this chapter. No, I'm not going to go verse by verse like that because that would mean we'd be here for 4 hours. But we see clearly here that just because our story is wrapped up into the grander story of Jesus, from the creation of the world to the restoration, the second coming, the mess doesn't go away. The tests, they don't go away. The weakness, they don't go away. This blind man, his neighbors and friends didn't even recognize him. They had a hard time believing it was him. It's not like Jesus gave him plastic surgery or a new outfit. It was the same guy. It shows me how outcast he was, how overlooked he was. His life was a mess. We see that he got tested over and over and over again. How many times did he share his story? 4 or 5 times? And no one would believe him. Not even the religious elite, the people who should have believed him. They didn't even want to believe him. All that testing, all of that questioning. His life was a mess. It was full of testing. And at the end, his parents rejected him. They disowned him. No, you ask him. We don't want to get in trouble. We don't care if he does, but we don't want to get in trouble. So go ask him. His life was a mess. And Jesus worked through that mess. Jesus worked in that mess. And at the end of that mess, at the end of that rejection and the disbelief and the disowning, Jesus found him in that mess once again. His story started with sin. That's how the world saw it. The world saw that his story began with sin and it ended with punishment. His life was a mess, and you may feel like your life is a mess. But in the grander story, your story, while it may look like a mess, it doesn't begin with sin and it doesn't end in punishment. Like the man, it begins with Jesus seeing you, and it ends ultimately with you seeing Jesus. Lord, I believe. In the name and for the sake of Jesus, amen.